Hello, Michigan Watercolor members. This is Rocco Pisto, President of the Michigan Watercolor Society. I'm here with Chris Krupinski, who is our juror for the 72nd annual exhibition this year. And Chris, tell us about yourself.
Well, I've been an artist all my life, and I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. In fact, I might overdo it a little bit, but I live and breathe art. I am a Dolphin Fellow of the American Watercolor Society. I'm a member of National Watercolor Society. I'm an elected member of Allied Artists. I'm a master with Transparent Watercolor Society of America. I'm a master with Watercolor West. I'm a platinum member of Alabama Watercolor Society, and on and on and on.
No, that's great. And you've had a busy, besides during our show this year, you have been accepted, seems like every week somewhere.
It's been a good year. I attribute a growth in art to painting every single day. And I encourage every artist to carve out a part of their life where they will commit to their art. And I think it's the best way to grow. And I do a lot of national shows, more for a measure of where my art is and where it's going, more for that than anything else. Because when you paint a lot, you don't see your work changing. It's like watching your kids grow. You don't see your kids grow. But when I enter shows, I'm asking my peers, am I still going in the right direction? So that's sort of a measure of where my art is going. And that's why you'll see me in a lot of shows. Hopefully it'll continue.
No, that's great. And what is your background in art?
Well, aside from coloring on walls when I was 2 years old, I have a degree in art education. Realized I really didn't want to teach full-time, and I went and got my degree in graphic design. And I've had my own graphic design business for years and years and years. And I think that graphic design has a bigger impact on my fine art than anything else.
Great. Chris, let's talk about the workshop that you did with our group this year. It was at the Botanical Gardens there in Ann Arbor, and we had a full class of 12 different and unique artists that attended your class. What's your thoughts about that class?
12 of the most wonderful people, and 12 of the most different people. The way I approach a workshop is to talk about composition and design in a painting, and to try to teach artists to see in a new way and to view what their subject matter is in a different way. I don't ask anybody to copy my technique or try, and it's amazing at the end of the 3 days to have 12 totally different designs, all still lifes, and 12 totally different approaches. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it, but I did. I got a lot of satisfaction out of seeing the end result of what we did.
So what kind of questions were you getting?
How do you paint a pomegranate? How do you paint a mango? How do you paint a cherry? More questions about maybe layout of elements. But the one thing I found that people do have a difficulty doing is when they're talking about elements in the paintings, they're seeing a cherry as a cherry, for instance, and I was trying to push them to just see it as a round shape or whatever. I was trying to push them to see beyond realism, and I think that's the most difficulty. But I think that takes a long, long time. But just putting this idea in their heads, I think that they'll take that with them and think about it whenever they apply whatever I've taught them to their own genre.
your work has a very unique perspective at looking at still lifes. Can you talk about that?
So much artwork out there is viewed straight on, with the light source being straight on. Whether it's landscape, figurative, still life. And so it just grew. I didn't start doing that whenever I started painting still lifes. But the more I got into painting, the more I photographed setups, the more I realized that there is a different way of looking at this world and a different angle. But again, the longer that I painted, the further away from seeing things realistically I got. So that if I would look at something at a different angle, I was seeing the design as opposed to what it really was. So if I would look at something from up above, it's a totally different angle. And then all of a sudden it's not as realistic. It has a different view. And it just started growing from there. And then I started backlighting, and I just think we all as artists need to always develop a new view of our world.
So let's talk about the backlighting. That was a whole unique scenario in itself.
Oh, the students in the workshop, all of a sudden they realized that when you're if you're doing a setup of oranges and cherries, say, now you're backlighting it, and now you've got these shadow shapes to deal with. That's another element added to the whole composition, because if you do anything that's front lit, your shadows fall behind it, and they're small. You don't really need to give them that much attention. But when they're in your face, all of a sudden shadow areas become really important. Your selection of color to put in those shadow areas are important. So now your oranges and your cherries weren't the only two elements in your painting. Now it was oranges, cherries, and shadows, and what shape those shadows took, and how big of an area they covered. And so they really, I can say that all 12 of them developed a new way to see that.
Oh, that was great. And you talk about that you're an abstract painter, even though you're looking at very realistic representational work. So explain that.
When I paint a quilt with a mango, grapes, and on a quilt of all squares, I see a big circle, small circles, and all these squares. And it's how I have to put all of these elements and shapes together. As soon as I allow the actual subject to stick in my mind, then I can't see these as shapes and how well they juxtapose and fit together. So I have to stay as abstract as I can. I want to see lines. Whenever I see folds in fabric, I see them as lines. I don't see them as folds. And whenever I have stripes, that's an element that is just made of line. And so I see all of these shapes, all different sizes, everything fitting together, and it's abstract. So yes, I'm an abstract painter.
And you're using 300-pound.
300-pound rough. One of the reasons I started way back when, before I realized the beauty of 300-pound rough, was I didn't want to get too realistic with things. I wanted it to keep me painterly. And so it did. I can't get too straight of a line. But now I realized all the wonderful things that a 300-pound rough can give you. I can beat my paper up. The texture that it allows me, I could never get that texture if I used cold press, and hot press was like painting on Yupo, so I can't do that. But so yeah, I found it. That's another thing that I did say to the students in class. Just because that's what I use doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. Every artist needs to paint in their style and what works for them. And I truly believe, getting back to painting a lot, giving yourself a lot of time to paint, you start experimenting and discover what works for you as an artist.
And you're using standard 22 by 30 or size paper.
Yes, full sheet. Almost all of my work is full sheet. It's either that or it's 6 inches by 4 inches or less, because I do paint miniatures sometimes.
And how much time to create the results that you've created in these paintings do you spend on a painting?
It's difficult to say, but I would have to say it's 150 hours or more per painting. And I used to want to finish a painting in a day, because I can be impatient. But I've learned that there's no shortcuts to what I do. And if I start feeling that little bit of impatience I get, I need to get up and walk away and come back, because it takes time. You can't put a time limit on what your outcome's gonna be. So I would rather it be right than fast.
So where do you see yourself in the next few years? The evolution of the work? Any thoughts on where you want to go?
Wherever this world takes me. I just know that every painting I paint, I enjoy the process. I enjoy the process so much. I don't care what the end result's gonna be. You can't. You've got to face every single challenge as they come along, and then think about, okay, how am I going to accomplish this? Where am I going to go with this? And that's the fun of painting. It's not that end result. And then, when you're finished with it, you look and say, okay, this is okay. And then I think about what to do with it. But I never ever think about what I'm going to do with the painting while I'm painting it. So, and it's just one painting after another. It's just a total progress. And I think what happens, if I look back to my paintings 10 years ago, I can see that I've gone in a different direction. I can see that I've grown. So 10 years from now, I guess it'll be the same thing. I'll look back to today and say, oh, that's where I was then. I don't know where this is going to take me, but I have nothing in mind of where to go.
Great. Well, I know I've gotten feedback from a number of the artists that were in your workshop, and one, it was well worth it. Two, you made them think about things they never thought about before. This is just some feedback I'm getting, and they really enjoyed the class. So thank you for taking the time to present your workshop to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Chris, let's talk about this year's exhibition. You've juried our show. You've seen all the slides that we sent you of everyone that submitted. Let's talk about the digital images that you reviewed. Any thoughts about what artists should be doing from that perspective when they submit digital images?
Yes. It's amazing when you see the actual images, and many times they're so different than digitals. I will tell you how I approach my own photography whenever I take pictures of my images that I'm going to enter in a show. I will take multiple images and then go through and find what I feel is the strongest image. Then I put it in Photoshop, or for those that don't have Photoshop, because it's expensive, Photoshop Elements. And then I leave my actual painting up, and I work adjusting color until they're as close as I can get them.
Color match.
Because they tell you, do not digitally enhance your digital, which you shouldn't do. But I don't enhance it, I match as closely as I can get, because sometimes it's going to be lighter, or it's going to be darker, or it's just, there were some images that when I saw the digitals, they were a little bit more washed out than the actual painting, and then I see the actual painting and go, wow. And so you have to remember that when a juror is looking through those images, they have nothing more to guide them than what they see. They don't know your work for the most part, And you could even get rejected from a show if your digital is not strong enough. And so that's the best advice I can get. That digital is your total representation of what you do, and keep it as strong as you can, because it's all the juror sees.
What, so you shoot your own work,
Yes.
and at what resolution? Is it 300 DPI or beyond?
Always. I always shoot at large. I never. It's funny. I have a good Canon digital, a 35 millimeter digital. I haven't used that camera in 5 years. I use my iPad now. An iPad will take a really strong image. But you know, but at a high resolution. I have it set that it's a high resolution, because if you take it at a high resolution, you can minimize it and not lose anything. But if you take something at a low resolution and try to enlarge it, you're going to lose some edges. It's going to get fuzzy and pixelated, and you don't want that to happen. You want to keep that image as sharp as you can. And I'll go right back to saying that's all the juror has for your representation. That's it. You know, so if I see a painting with a reflection in glass, or a digital and there's reflection in glass, I don't know if that's part of the painting, or I don't know if that's whatever. So remember, you want to send whatever you say to yourself, this is good, I'm proud of this.
Great. So overall, we're going to show, tomorrow actually is on Saturday is our opening reception for the show for everyone to see. How did you select this show?
When I first get this whole group of digitals, I try to go through them without any thought. Just go through them. And there's certain paintings that just jump out. I'm not looking for composition. I'm not looking for anything. I just want to review them all, just to see what I have as a base to work with. I must go through them 3 to 5 times, just not even really stopping very long at any one. And like I said, there are a few that'll jump out. Then whenever I'm ready to really start going through, I start going through each one and studying the composition, studying the colors, trying to understand what the artist is trying to say through their work. But being a composition and design nut, I think that jumps out at me more than anything. But once, I will say that before the show is absolutely finished being selected, I must view it 10 to 15 times. And some of those pieces that jumped out initially, sometimes they fall to the bottom, because now that I've studied the nuances and other things, you know, the smaller things that some of these other pieces have given me that you don't see with your first go around, they start rising in importance. Because I think the initial time you go through, something with high impact tends to jump out and hit you. You know, sometimes a smaller little gem you don't really see until you study it a bit.
Yeah. Was it hard selecting a show this size, or do you like, are they typically bigger for you or smaller?
This probably falls somewhere in the middle, but the other thing I wanted to say that's important, nobody should ever get down on themselves if they're rejected, because as a juror, I might, you know, if there are 200 entries and 20 florals, even if all 20 florals are great, they're not going to all get picked. As a juror, I want to show that when you have people come and view it, every single person that walks through the door will be able to find something that they can relate to. So I will not have a realism show. I will not have an abstract show. I will not have a floral show. I will not have a figurative show. I will not have an animal show, but I will have a little bit of all of it. And I think that's something that everybody can come in and enjoy everything there is. It's going to be diverse. So that is one of the things. So if you've done something that's rejected, does not mean it's a bad painting by any means, and people shouldn't go away feeling badly, because that painting could be selected for a show somewhere else.
We've noticed in your selection for this show that there's probably 14 artists that have both paintings in the show, like the ones behind you. And just kind of curious on your thought process there.
They were strong. They were really strong. That's hard to pick which one to put in the show. Very hard to pick. And there are definitely artists in the show here that have a broad range of technique and style. I can't remember the specific artist's name, but there were two paintings I would have never guessed in a million years was the same artist, but they were both strong. And of the paintings that by the same artist, I would say these are the most similar. Everything else, you'd have to read the name to see them.
Sure. Any closing thoughts on the show before we get into looking at the award winners?
Well, as I said before, seeing the digital images, I thought it was a good show. Walking in and seeing the actual artwork, it's not just a good show, it's an extremely strong show.